Hey, Warren Whitlock here with another Distributed Conversations interview. Today, I have a very long-term dear friend, Jeremy Britton. We actually recently went years without talking, got on a call a couple of weeks ago, and it was like nothing had changed, even though we're both working in different industries and investments all the time. The relationship's there, solid guy, and look him up, Boston Trading Company. And here he is, Jeremy Britton. Welcome to the show.
Mate, it's so good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Let's start off with you telling us a little bit something about, for those few who don't know you, tell us a bit about Jeremy. Where'd you come from? I know you're not next door to me. Tell the people a little bit of something about you and how you got to this point in life.
Mate, yes, I'm literally almost 12 hours or more ahead of you. I think I'm in Australia. So it's already tomorrow morning whenever I'm talking to people in the US or in Europe. And I was thinking the other day, when we first met was probably 2005, 2006. And I was either just finishing or had just finished my first book. And then you were doing book promotion back and then. So many years ago. So my 2006 book actually was not very popular in the US. It was popular in other countries. It became an international bestseller. But back in 2006, I was saying all the mortgages who are being given to the dogs and cats and elephants and things like that, plus the US federal debt is going to cause problems. There's going to be a housing crisis, which is going to spread to the stock market because the banks are going to take the hit. So, yeah, so I was the one kid on the Titanic
you
who
hit
was saying,
the nail on the
iceberg.
head. Yeah.
2 years before it happened, I was very unpopular. But after the 2008 global financial crisis hit, then all of a sudden people said, oh, you tried to warn us. And instead of being unpopular, I was now interviewed for every radio station, every TV station, all throughout the US and internationally. And it ended up with my own radio show in New York for 2 years. I had a weekly radio show and that turned into a TV show.
Right.
Yeah, that was like when we first met. It's just before I became famous.
I did work on a book that was triple bubble.
Yeah.
And that the stock market, real estate, and I don't know what, debt?
Yeah.
Those are separate things.
Yeah,
I think those were the three. And I looked at it and went, okay, this makes sense. And I did buy a house in 2005 in fast-growing Las Vegas. Ended up losing everything because of it. At the same time, it was a bargain at the price we paid, and it went up more. What I couldn't control was what was going on with who else was getting the same kind of mortgage I had. So I'm in that bundle of horrible mortgages that got written off and had to go through losing a house. Had you told me when we met, had you told me I was going to have a foreclosure, I said, that's absolutely impossible. I always pay my bills. I'm always money ahead. There's no way I'm going to let this happen. And then boom, suddenly my house is worth 10% of what it was because I was in a kind of a speculative area. And it turned out my neighborhood was full of speculation houses that just weren't needed in the market. So anybody that wanted to sell had to sell, and that's the price it went back to a broke mortgage company. There just was nothing we could do except for learn. And I'm not in that position again. And it taught me to say, if you want to have advice on success, marketing, promotion, things like that, come see me. I understand business from being up and down and a lot of things. You want financial advice? Go see people like my friend Jeremy. Even though I study those markets like crazy now, I don't pretend to know anything. So in case somebody's here by mistake, we're not giving financial advice today. We're just two guys talking and hopefully some insight that we get. I think I've told you before, and it's probably been on the podcast at least once, I look at finances like a game of Monopoly. I may win, may lose, doesn't matter. I'm going to want to play again. And if I lose all the time, I may decide to play a little different game. If I have the thrill of thinking I'm going to win and I win occasionally, that's okay. Life is a gamble. And that Monopoly game may end for any number of reasons. The government can end it. Mom can end it, assuming we're kids playing Monopoly. The dog may knock it over. And I also, one of the things I've learned about people is if you're winning, you want to keep the game going. no matter what happens, there's going to be something else. So if you're listening to this show and you think like you've missed out on Bitcoin, or you want to wish you knew more about AI, and is it too late? No way. It's not too late. Things are keep getting better all the time. And today, I read a quote that was Peter Diamandis saying, when you see a problem, create a business. Absolutely. And I'm just in the middle of reviewing a book I loved when it came out, Who Not How. Most of the time when we look at a problem, we try to figure out how to fix it. We've been taught to learn skills and be able to fix things. I'm getting an audiobook version, which is some stuff I didn't get in the book when I read it. The first thing the guy did was hire a co-author to write the book. There are no books that were written just by Warren. I'm up to 16 now. Co-author or contributing a chapter. My name right in the front many times, but none of them are just me. It's always me and others. And because other people organize things better than I do.
To relearn and re-educate yourself, mate. Because as you said, like in school, you're taught that if you're weak in math, you do extra math. And if you're weak in this, you do extra. And you've got to do everything yourself. But the moment you leave school, you go, oh, I'm not going to fix my own wiring in my house. I'm not going to do my own plumbing. You've got to hire the person who's actually qualified to do that. And outsourcing is just the game changer.
My children all know, the youngest is 37, but they all have always known that it doesn't matter what's happening. If you need to talk to dad, come right in and talk to him. I'm going to hang up on whoever else there is, take care of their problem. And again, that's who. That's not how.
Yes.
There's no right way to do any of this stuff. It's the who. So one of the things they're talking about, Diamandis calls it your moonshot. It's MTP, massively transformative purpose. What is it you want to do? And are you thinking big enough? And I look at what I want to do. One of the things I'm working on is doing a better job on the podcast. I read an article this morning about in the top 50 podcasts, 37 of them have something with video. And another half of what's left have something on Spotify. The author said that wasn't quite as good as being on YouTube. 37 was that total of those two. And there was still 13 out of 50 that were audio only. And it still managed to be in the top 50 listened to podcasts. And don't take your focus off of the audio that's going on, the conversation, by trying to mess with the camera. And that's me. I know I want video on when I'm recording. So we do that all the time. Option. Yeah.
If you're having breakfast, you'll watch video.
Yeah, my favorite podcasts do not have video. It's guys talking. And one of them is 3 people in different locations host the podcast, and then they have a guest. And it's mayhem every time. People stepping on each other. They're good friends. They're all famous actors and with busy schedules. And it's rough cut. It's what you get. What you hear is what you get. And I feel more like these guys are my friends and somebody I understand what motivates them. And I'm learning from it. And I'm going like, yep, it's a lot like me other than the celebrity part.
I did the New York radio show every week for 2 years, but I would phone in from Australia and I'm hosting the show. My co-host is in New York, in Manhattan. The producer was in Milwaukee, and then the guest was wherever the guest was in another time zone.
Oh, that's a 4-way phone call.
I know. We're all coordinated with the mixing desk, but every now and then, like it's daylight saving in some state in the US, and because I'm not living in the US, it's not advertised on TV for 3 weeks saying it's daylight saving. So I got a phone call while I'm having breakfast one morning saying, where are you? You're supposed to be here for a sound check. And I'm like, no, not for another 55 minutes. And they're like, no, we're on now. California's on, or New York's on daylight time. I didn't know. So I run into the studio.
It's just that. I have relaxed a lot in the last 5 years with a lot more people that are doing this less often. And if you don't show up, I've got something else to do. I now have a watch for the first time in 30 years. I'm wearing a watch. Apple Watch with a lot of doohickeys on it, trying to get better health. But mostly I can say, set alarm for, and then I set it for 3 minutes before when my wrist vibrates. And it didn't take long to realize I hardly ever look at the calendar. I check what's on for the next day. I set a wrist alarm and I'm about it. For me right now, so I know what's changed in your world now. You not only got rich from all of this, but you're also, or made a living. You can claim either one or both. And now you're helping other people do the same thing. We talk a lot about decentralized, how everything should be self custody, and in AI, have the processing right on your person. I was just listening to something this morning talking about trillions of AI agents in the next few years, 10 billion robots. We're all going to be controlling, and in many cases, still other people, and hopefully not saying controlling, but guiding, helping, leading. What's the reason that in this day and age to be able to say, hey, I don't want to do this, and your who becomes a mutual fund? Isn't that
I mean,
centralized?
yeah, it is. But I think a lot of people, they start off with that because it's easier, and some people just stay there their entire life. So my first introduction to investing was through mutual funds because it was easy. But I was one of those kids. My dad gave me an old toaster and I pulled it apart to find out how it made the toast. He gave me an alarm clock and I pulled apart the alarm clock to find out how the alarm clock worked because I was a tinkerer.
Put those
Destroyed
back
things.
together.
Oh, absolutely not. But I learned things. I didn't become a watchmaker, but I learned how things worked. And when I first got into mutual funds at 18 or 19, I'd get the reports and I'd read the reports and they say Coca-Cola stock's going up. And I went, oh, that makes sense because it's summertime, people are drinking more drinks. And then Coca-Cola stocks would go down in the winter and something else would go up seasonally. And I'd start to look at how it worked and why it worked. And that got me then interested in buying my own stocks and recommending stocks for other people. But a lot of my clients, when I was financial planning for 30 odd years, they were very busy. They had their business, they had their children or their grandchildren, they had their boats or their horses or their whatever they wanted to do. They didn't want to sit there and learn how to chart their own stocks and buy their own stocks and things like that. So the higher net worth individuals, I'm happy with the mutual funds. When I first got into crypto, more than 10 years ago now, I thought, oh, this is a little tiny stock market. I know how to work the stock market. I know how to do the research. I know how to buy my own stocks. And I was teaching other people for free, just here's how to do the research and here's how to choose your crypto and here's how to buy the crypto. And a few of my friends came back and went, oh, that's great for you, but I've got grandchildren and I've got a financial planning practice, or I'm a dentist and I work 12 and 16 hours a day and blah, blah, blah. So a bunch of people came to me and said, can you do it for us? And I'm like, oh, legally, I can't. There's no regulations around it. But one way we could potentially do it is to create a crypto mutual fund the same way as Vanguard and BlackRock and everybody else have created stock mutual funds. So then we went to the accountant thinking it's going to be very simple to set up a unit trust. But obviously with the stock mutual funds and the property mutual funds, they're location specific. It's Japanese stock market or it's US real estate market or whatever. And the accountant's going, where are these assets located? And we're like, nowhere, but everywhere at the same time, because no one had heard of crypto back then. And it's, oh, okay. So it's not in a specific country. And what's the asset? Is it property? Is it bonds? Is it stocks? Is it debt? Is it commodities? And we're like, none of the above, but all of the above. So it was very challenging to try and create a crypto mutual fund when none had ever existed before and the laws and the regulations weren't set up for it. But we'd started down the path, and I'm a persistent little bugger, so I'm going to finalize this. And when we first started the fund, there was only 6 of us in the fund. It was like 2 financial planners, 2 accountants, 2 lawyers, because these are the people we'd gone to and said, hey, we want to start capturing this. And we said, well, just try it out for a year or 2. If it works okay, then we'll launch it to the public. If it doesn't work okay, then we'll bury it and pretend it never happened. But we managed to outperform Bitcoin for 2 years. So then we launched it to the public and went, hey, anybody who wants to get in can get in, but we still continue with the free education. So the free education, teaching people how to choose their own crypto, we've continued with that for more than 10 years. If someone doesn't want to get in the mutual fund, the least we can do is teach them how to do it safely.
There's a natural path of, it's like climbing a mountain, and some people might call it a pyramid. I prefer mountain. Yeah. It isn't as regular as a triangle or a pyramid, and not straight sides. And as you climb up and it gets to the rarer and rarer top, and to be able to go see the guru at the top or get the best view or whatever, it takes a lot of work. And finding people along the way that will either travel with you or in some cases go for you makes perfect sense. My question is about distributed and centralized. Do you have to centralize and commingle the funds, or would you be able to do the same thing with every wallet is secured as one person's assets.
There are, I'm not sure whether you'd call them funds, but it's more like copy trading, where you can open an account on a major exchange, say Binance or KuCoin or any of these ones, have an API code, and then you pass the API code along to the alleged manager. And when they buy, you buy. And when they sell, you sell. But the funds remain on your exchange under your control. So that's, for some people, that's more appealing.
Difference with crypto is in a lot of investments, there are time elements about how long till a bond matures or a stock has a dividend. In crypto, it's always liquid. Is your fund as liquid as me putting the crypto in my own wallet?
We like to be 90% liquid at any time, because every now and then there might be a bank run. People might want all their money back. And if their cat needs emergency surgery at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, we want to be able to pull at least 90% of their money out. To get the best bang for our buck, sometimes we'll invest in things that are illiquid or unlisted. So, for example, some of the exchanges are not listed. Like the crypto exchanges business is not listed on the stock exchange. They may list there eventually, like Coinbase is obviously listed on the NASDAQ, but there's some exchanges that are not yet listed. So we'll invest in early stage. It's like buying Amazon before it launched, or buying Facebook before it launched. You're going to get 300 or 3,000% growth, but you need to be locked up maybe for a couple of years. But in that aspect, we try to minimize that as much as possible. So the fund is mostly liquid most of the time.
That makes sense. Most of my investments are in things like that. They're not handy for pulling out cat surgery money. If you do the timing right and you take it out before it drops 80%, you might be able to do it, because they have a big boost when they start. And you really don't want to be playing that game, because somebody else can play better and pull the rug out from under you. But if you're looking at good companies and what they're doing, it's going to take them a little while, which kind of leads me to the next idea of one we're working on right now. AI Quant.Fund is a project we're working on that will use an AI agent to do the quant work. It's up to nearly 100 things it's looking at on 3 million tokens every day, more research than any one person can do. It's in all the paper trades right now, so there's some successes, but you can't advertise that as a return on investment. And of course, you have to look at overall what's happening. And as the agent learns, it's made some mistakes. It's not quite ready, but when it does, I think that's, by definition, the AI is going to get better and better at doing this. At what point does that overtake what you're able to do? And what part of it is people powered to where yours has more trust?
I think, Warren, a lot of people think AI didn't exist up until ChatGPT came out like 2 or 3 years ago. I'm old enough to remember a program called Talking Eliza that was around in the 1980s. And I actually...
It was around in the 70s.
Oh, there you go. I wasn't around back then. I used that program because my uncle, when his computer became redundant, he gave me his old 16 kilobyte computer, and I had this Talking Eliza program. So I would sit there as a kid for hours talking to this thing, and it would talk back to me. So artificial intelligence has always been around as far as processing. And even in the stock market during the 1980s, there's black box programs that would say, oh, we can trade faster and buy better than a human being because of this and this, whatever the 386 computer chip was out back then. But the programs couldn't read the news. They wouldn't know why the stock was dropping or why it was going up. They would just follow the trend.
That's the difference now.
On 9/11, the computers would have been buying airline stocks because, oh my God, airline stocks have gone down. They're cheaper now. But any human being watching 9/11 would go, maybe I don't want to own airline stocks for the next 2 years or so. People aren't going to travel after this very much. So that's why fund managers such as myself and the hedge fund guys on Wall Street still exist, because we can process thousands of unrelated bits of information from all over the place.
That's fascinating.
And understand what's going on.
Just rewatched a movie called Zero Effect, and the main character is Dan Zero, played by Bill Pullman, just fantastic performance. And he is a detective that looks completely lazy and very weird, never leaves his office, but of course on this mission he does, and that's where the fun begins. But one of the things he said was he started keeping a diary to let people know what his process was. And it's some crazy comments. That's where the comedy part of the movie comes from. Very dry humor. But
Mm,
the comment I love is when you're looking for something and you're looking for one thing, you will fail unless you find that one thing. But
mm.
if you're looking for everything, you're sure to find something. And that's it. We have so many more inputs. Yes, the testing I've seen now is that this AI is up to 100 inputs. For instance,
Mm,
your tokens may be going up steadily since release, but
mm.
has no liquidity. If people
Yeah.
start jumping on, the liquidity is going to get eaten up and it's going to turn the other direction. To me, that's the obvious one. I know no liquidity. I am invested in many where they gave me a whole bunch of tokens and then didn't
Yeah.
put any liquidity when they put it on exchange and the price goes down. But the price will go back up on that one as the product gets released.
Mm.
And that's may not be the kind of things they know. One of the signals they're getting is Twitter.
Yeah.
Many people call it X.com. Now I call it Twitter.
Thank
The
you.
Twitter crypto world is fascinating. I've just gone through having my account stolen after 17 and a half years. The
Oh God.
account, somebody stole the account and renamed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I was immediately able to go out and claim my name. So I'm still there, but it was
Mm.
with no followers. And after fighting with X for a while, I'm not giving up, but I have realized that it's time to get started. So just finished my first month, but I'm up to 850 and feeling it because it went from 462,000 to zero.
Mm.
It's been an interesting. One of the things that I'm finding in the active people who have new small accounts and are working on them is that they want them to be there for whatever token or whatever they're supporting. And it may
Mm.
be one of the major players and it may be a political thing, but then quite often it's just, I've got this token, I want to support it. So watching
Yeah.
the announcements and the activity, somebody opens an account and then it's just sitting there and then suddenly has good news then,
Mm.
and it gets mentioned a whole lot more. There's one signal. It's one of
Yeah. Yeah.
the 94 when I looked at it. And it's fascinating to think where that's going to go. And I predict we're going to have a little period of time with those of us who have tools like that can get a little bit ahead, but at
Mm.
some point it'll become mainstream. And of course, the big boys will, if they don't have it, will get it, add it to
Yeah.
whatever they're doing. Level play, the level playing field will not last, and they'll figure
Mm.
out something else to do. But the
Mm.
idea of distributed ownership seems like one of the reasons why crypto is the future is that there isn't somebody playing tricks with it in the big New York funds.
Yeah.
Am I overstating that?
No, I think that's one of the interesting things for me as well. I made a video like 10 years ago called Why I Love Crypto More Than the Stock Market,
Oh,
because we've just come off of Easter. So there's Friday was a public holiday, Saturday there was no trading, Sunday there's no trading, Monday was a public holiday, and fifth day is the first time that you can actually jump in there and buy or sell your stocks. Whereas obviously with cryptocurrency, it's a global asset. It's the first time ever we've had a truly global asset. So there's people in China and India who don't celebrate Easter and they're still buying and selling. You yourself, you lived in Thailand for 2 years, I lived in Bali for 2 years, and I could go out on Christmas Day, I could go to the pub and have lunch in the pub and buy a beer because the Hindu guys were working on Christmas Day because they don't celebrate Christmas. Great. Yeah, that's why the Jewish guys go out to the Chinese restaurants on Christmas. We're all celebrating at different times. But during the past 4 or 5 days, the market has moved. And I was just commenting to the CEO this morning, like the crypto has moved, well, Bitcoin has moved from 77,000 to 87,000 within
mm-hmm.
a few days. Most of the Western market, so Canada, US, Australia, England, was closed during
Mm-hmm.
that time and couldn't trade their stocks and shares. But there's people trading crypto 24/7 while you're sleeping. There's people trading crypto in other countries,
And there
and
are
it's just
bots
really
trading. So there's lots of
absolutely,
things going on. I did have one
yeah.
company ask me to help them because they were coming out and I said, when are you announcing this? Well, it comes out in 2 days. And I
Mm,
go, send me the contract. I've got time tomorrow, the
yeah,
day in between. Got time. I'll take a look at, we'll get you a press release out and try some things like that. But basically, it's free tokens. And it was a lot of tokens. And okay, great, I'll take this. And they were taking investments at 20 cents.
Right.
And mine were valued at 16 or 20. I can't remember. It didn't matter what they were valued at on paper because as soon as then they paid, I think at the time was 8 Bitcoin. Bitcoin was worth a lot less, but that was still tens of
Yeah.
thousands that they paid for liquidity. And they put it on a Korean exchange. And nothing against my good friends that are Korean, but
Yeah.
Korean exchanges, when you can't go anywhere else, means, yeah, there's a reason why you picked that one.
Yeah.
And that was all set up. And he said, do what you can. We got them a little bit of publicity. They had more people coming around, but the minute it came out, it just went, phew. The bots took over and it went down to thousandths of a penny immediately.
Wow.
And if I had millions, I still had something for a while, but obviously, if they were unlocked and able to trade, I would have killed the market trying to get rid of any of them. Just wrote that off and went on. It was horrible because the guy had a pretty good idea. And a couple of months later, he gave up and went into something else. This is all just before the pandemic. And next time I hear from him, he's got a deal on mask. And he did that for a while and then it's something else. And I'm thinking like, God, I'll put all that work into this. We need finance that we can count on that is going to work in these situations, but not let the hucksters and the degens control all that. And I love some degens. They're helpful every once in a while. It's interesting to see our starter labs was releasing stuff in the last cycle. And I think we had 160, and the ones that they really controlled and they were involved in how to launch it. Out of those, all of them went up, collected how much money. There were small amounts of money, 50 to 500, and they raised the money. Some of them stayed around for a while. Some of them were instantly gone, but all of them suffered from all the payments were based in Ethereum, and Ethereum went from 4,700 back down to 2,000, and they didn't have anything left. The big thing we learned there was not to take payments in the company's crypto. Because the company, I'm an advisor, the company had been taking one Ethereum to cover expenses and then the tokens to make up the rest. And they were getting a fair share, they weren't able to liquidate them. And I think whenever you look at things longer term, it's a pretty good thing. There is a problem, it seems, at least here in the US, I've noticed. It's not quite as easy to open a sandwich shop or a dry cleaning establishment, anything like that, because you can't walk into the bank and get a loan. And you need to find some other way to do things. Meanwhile, with crypto and DeFi, we are able to raise a lot of money fast, but some of the things are a bit scammy. So is there a way forward in there? If you had a friend dying to open up a local delicatessen, what kind of financing would you use today?
That's the double-edged sword thing. The great thing about crypto is anybody can launch a token. And the worst thing about crypto is that anybody can launch a token. So, a few months ago, we literally had a 13-year-old child who launched a token from his basement, and it was all going to do this, and it was promising. No one knew it was a 13-year-old kid, right? Because this 13-year-old kid was just playing games, as you do. And this kid rug pulled people live on YouTube and just said, hey, look, I've just taken all your money. There's been a lot of rug pulls because literally anybody can make any coin for a couple of $100. You can't list on the NASDAQ unless you're a serious company. You've got several $1 million to pay for the lawyers and the red tape and put up a surety bond. It's at least a $10 million exercise to list on a stock exchange somewhere. But for a couple of $100, you can list a crypto. And you can call it whatever you want. You can pretend whatever you want. And it's up to investors to do the research to make sure it's a legitimate project versus something that's just made.
We had the Jobs Act, which wasn't anything to do with employment. A good way to get through Congress is to call it the Jobs Act. And part of that was that we were going to allow more investments. And when I found out about it, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, hadn't been finance. Most of the time, my credit card came in handy and funded and did everything myself, pivoted. Didn't matter because it was just me. So a proprietor a lot of that time. Not recommending this, but that's what I did. And so this comes along and I look at it and I go, weird. I can go to Vegas with the last money I have on earth, walk into a casino, 13-year-old can't, any adult can, walk into the casino, place it all on red and let them spin the wheel. and
Yeah.
you're either doing better or you're wiped out immediately. And a case can be made if I didn't know what I was doing, can I have some of it back? No. But there's those type of things. Gamblers Anonymous, if you're addicted to it, all that, it remains possible for that kind of a thing to happen. Fred Smith, when he was starting FedEx, took the payroll money and went and flew on one of the company planes to Vegas and went in and put it all down on a spin of a wheel. And
Yeah.
we got lucky, or else I think we'd have overnight deliveries. It just wouldn't be called FedEx.
Exactly.
It would have died and something else would have to get built. And
UPS.
I think we're better off for him having won that day, but that is not a way to run a company or finance anything. So there's somewhere in between where I ought to be able to say, I think that we need a deli in town, and you have some experience in a kitchen. You seem like a good person. I'm going to twist your arm or beat you or whatever I have to do to get your deli to run, even if I have to step in and help you make sandwiches because I got skin in the game. And we'll go make deals or whatever we have to do to let the thing grow. Or maybe we lose. And I shouldn't be restricted by whether or not that $10,000 I'm giving you is all the money I have on earth or just pocket change. And there's something to that. That's what the Jobs Act was supposed to do. Here it is 12 years later, not much change. And meanwhile, DeFi has come, and again, not much change. We get a lot of people warning, don't get into that, but there should be some way to get some kind of a stable fund. I look at some of the other stuff. I look at, the Bangladesh idea where the economists went in and found out that if you could get a circle of 5 women who trusted each other, you could give them some money and they could loan it to each other. They kept all the record. They all doubled to quintupled the size of their businesses and then went out and invested in other things. There's some place they say in India where that's turned into consumer finance, different problem, but the core of that seemed to make some sense that people were involved. Do you think that's possibly the answer for decentralized finance? Where we don't trust? Because the idea of trusting the hurdle doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah. A utility token. So when you're using the example of the deli there, like I could say, I'm going to start a deli and I'm going to sell whatever. And then I'm going to take investments from you. Like I'm going to take 10,000 from you, 10,000 from somebody else. And if the deli does well, then you're eventually going to see some money back, but only over a period of years with slower profits and things like that.
Right.
Whereas if I said to you, I'm going to open a bakery and I'm going to sell just loaves of bread. That's it. No other things. But I want you to put in $10,000, and for your $10,000, I'm going to give you a token that's worth 10,000 loaves of bread. And you go, loaf of bread for $1, that's a bargain, even if it's delayed. And then you can sit for the next few years. Every time you come in, you can give me a token instead of giving me a few dollars. That's great for you. It's a bargain for you. Or you can go back and sell those tokens to other people who also want bread. So utility tokens, I think, are really good.
That's good because we're getting back to basic economics of fish and coconuts and those kind of trading, the barter kind of thing. We discussed this quite a bit. I'm on a board of advisors for Paisley. It's being used as a wallet at the Convex layer 1 that is actually a lattice technology that is able to do transactions faster and localized to wherever the people are using it. And Paisley is planned to be something where anybody can go create that token. And to get it listed, still some investment, but actually create it. I did this on another network that has no exchange for anything else. But when I found out it was available, I had to do it. They gave me a little bit of gas money for their network. And I went in and typed a couple of things into a form. And in 3 minutes, I had 1 billion Warren tokens. To date, now it's been 6 or 7 years, no one but me has any Warren tokens. They're all in a wallet. If that network still exists, I'm pretty sure it does. And I could do whatever I want with it, but I have to come up with something and create that market for myself. I find that's one of the things that degens, for lack of a better word, I don't like that word. It sounds like we're always putting them down, but some people like being called that. But to me, it stands for degenerate. Maybe they have a better way of explaining it. But those people who love the trading, the guy I talked to at the dinner last night, he is a trader. He trades in very short trades in Forex.
Yeah, yeah.
And he spends minutes every day going in and
Yes.
picking something. This trade in and out takes less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And he either makes money or he doesn't.
The casino example, right? It's exactly
Exactly.
the same thing. He's got
And
no idea how the wheel works or why it works. He just puts the
it's
money in
where
and you
we
either
are
lose
on
or
the-
you win. That's it.
It's where we are in the AI quant right now, is that it will
Yeah.
be like the casino. We'll go in and pick something. Doesn't matter if it gets the odds. If you're counting cards and playing blackjack, you only have to be pretty good at counting the cards, and you have a better odds than if you were there. So you go in with $10,000 and sit down at the table, and some days you walk out with nothing, and some days you win. And
Yeah,
if you can afford that lifestyle, over time, the odds are in your favor because you've learned how to count the cards.
Big difference between gambling, investing, and trading and investing. Like even in the stock market days, like I had friends who would day trade, and they'd be trading Forex or they'd be trading stocks, but they didn't know what the stocks were. They didn't know what the codes looked for. They didn't know who the CEO was and what the company made. They were just watching the lines going down and watching the lines going up, just charting and going, oh, we think it's going to go like this, which is basically horoscope for grown men. Whereas investing, we do a research and go, who's running the company? What's their experience? What markets have they been in before? Where did they come from? What's the product? Is there a market for the product? Do people like this product?
I've got one that came out at 7 cents and is now selling for sub penny. And that's what I get for advising. And I look at it and say, sheesh, I'm maybe making $1 an hour over the last 4 years I've been involved with them. But at any time, they can get it hit so it's actually functioning. And they've got a utility model that makes those tokens worth $1. Yeah. Suddenly, I got a nice big payday. Yeah. And if somebody buying right now would get the same thing if they could understand and know all the people I know and all the hours I put into it. I'm not looking to sell. I probably could get a few $1,000s out of it, but I'm not looking to sell.
Not until it gets to $1.20.
$1.20, it's a different thing. These aren't sprouting blonde hairs coming out. I have to think in terms of having something besides. My biggest problem is having too much of my portfolio in crypto. Again, this is not financial advice. Don't come to Warren for financial advice. But it seems to me that if we use the power of AI and the people controlling it and getting to know people, then the research that you have to do gets done a whole lot faster and a lot more up to date. Just before the internet, you couldn't have a Google search following if there's any bad news posted about the CEO of the company. And some people were looking for that. I can get ahead. I can trade the stock because the bad news has come out and I'm going to be the first to get to it. I go, no, if I know what it is and I predict that that guy's going to be okay, I'm going to say, don't sell. Let it go down and maybe accumulate some more. When you have a CEO like Elon, you can count on things that are going to crash the stock every once in a while. But for the most part,
Warren Buffett said, buy a company that even an idiot can run, because sooner or later an idiot will run the company.
That's a good way of looking.
And if it's a good product, it doesn't matter about the CEO. I mean, what was Steve Ballmer, when he got into Microsoft, when he resigned or left or sacked or whatever, when he left, the stock went up. Because people had such a low opinion of him, they thought anybody would be better than this guy. And okay, but still, Microsoft is a good product, right? So it doesn't matter whether you've got a bad CEO or a good CEO, it's still going to be reasonably okay.
And personally, I was negative on it. I liked it. I was a Microsoft dealer for a short period of time. We were in the laser printer business. And so occasionally we'd have a client in our town of 100,000 with no other computer stores that wanted something like Microsoft products. So we signed up to be a dealer. It meant we had free copies of the software to play with. That was the big plus. And we could make $10 on a $1,000 installation once in a while. And I used to joke that Bill Gates is 2 months to the day older than me. And he got there first. If it wasn't for him, I'd have the billion. Had my own reason to hate him. But in watching it and watching how they overtook IBM, which back in the day when we were kids, no one got fired for buying IBM. It was the thing to do, whether it was the stock or the company or whatever. The employees never got fired. It was the solid gold, big blue. And Microsoft came along and toppled that in the PCs and became the one to own. Intel helped a lot with that. And something else is going to happen. It's going to be somebody else. You might be able to say that's Google for a different type of a company as we went on the internet. Microsoft did get a hold of the internet and did a good job, somewhat good job keeping up with it. But I think Google is having the same trouble keeping up with AI now because they've had their 20 years. Used to
Yeah.
be solid company. You say, tell your grandkids, this is what you're going to be investing in.
Yeah,
If you bought Coca-Cola in the 1920s, you'd be rich now. Nothing else but soda pop. And some of the car companies that have just been around that long. But I think for the most part, we're going to see more companies disappear over time. And then it's another way of looking at it, isn't it? When they make a film in
You go back
Hollywood.
100 years, there was 100 car manufacturers in the US alone.
Yeah.
100 years ago.
So you
Where are they
look
all
at
now?
it like how they make movies in Hollywood. There's
Yeah.
thousands per year.
Yeah.
And I've started watching the credits, not
Yeah.
memorizing who's on them. I have
Yeah.
IMDb. I can pretend I know what I'm doing. And when I see a director and an actor make a good film, and then I see that every time these two work together, it's a good film, I want to pay attention. Suddenly, listening to a podcast with either of those personalities talking to a podcast host I like becomes very important for me to learn. And when it gets over, I go, it pretty much was a waste of an hour, but I couldn't sleep at 1 a.m. and I put this thing on. But while I'm listening to it, I'm just enthralled that these people had a life, did whatever, came together. And that one of the sayings is Hollywood's a small town. For one thing, when you do something, your names are in celluloid permanently
Yeah.
or digital, but it's still permanent on the credits. And they want to work together. So I recall when I lived in Southern California, I had a friend who drove, I think he was driving 2.5 hours to get there. And he was a driver for a celebrity on a TV show. And that was his job. But he had also worked in things like set design. And I've met some of those people here in Vegas that have a steady income of taking care of the big shows and the behind the scenes stuff that happens. And yeah, they know each other and they stay on the same job, but they don't have, other than maybe some union benefits, they don't have anything, job security. And so how many days of shooting? Maybe a few extra days for some reshoots. If they're in the editing, they get paid during that time, but the actors and the set people are gone. And then after the editing, there's some other things. They call everybody back for a premiere, and then they're pretty much gone. No matter who you are, your contract. And I started applying that to even like a sitcom series, a big one. They have to contract those people in such a way that they can keep them if the series is a hit. But if it goes 6 shows and then out, they get that. It's lovely that today we have so many different formats. Here in Las Vegas, we have casinos that are torn down and then a new one built. And they're good buildings. They're 30, 40 years old. They could be refurbished, repurposed, made into apartments. There's a lot of things you would do in a normal city. But in Vegas, where the real estate's worth many millions of dollars per acre, and you've got 5 acres at one of the hot spots, they tear that down and they build something else. And I am thinking, what happens when we have technology that allows the robots to go out and build a building that fast? A pop-up becomes a permanent structure that can still be taken apart or taken down or reused in some way. And we're recycling everything. Man, I think we're going to want to take a bet on some people rather than the processes.
Are people going to go to the casinos in the next few years, though, Warren? That's the question. If I can gamble from home, and there's the US lottery, right? Or you might have your state lottery.
Right.
And there's an uplift
in
on
Nevada.
how many...
We don't need one in Nevada.
How many billions of dollars can you win on the US lottery or on the state lottery in New York or something like that? But then if you include the entire world and say, what about if we had the Chinese lottery and the Brazilian lottery and the Russian lottery and the Indian lottery, and you combine like 4 billion people all buying tickets all at once?
I have a real narrow view of how that looks, and no matter what, all of the talent and everything has been attracted to Vegas. So we're always going to be on top. When Macau was built, that was happening as I moved here. And it was in the news a lot because the companies here were building in Macau, and that becomes Las Vegas business news. And when I came in, I subscribed to business magazines and newspapers and tried to follow that to get into the Las Vegas scene. And what's all this talking about? I found out my kid went to work for the Wynn, and he was stocking mini bars. He told me about this and that and things happen. A guy that had been in a room since it was built, and it was Mr. Somebody. Everybody knew who he was. He didn't use maid service or anything, but it was like his apartment. It turns out that guy left with a many millions of dollar bill. They had to kick him out. But Steve Wynn lived at the top of it. All sorts of interesting stories about what really goes on in there. But the predominance of people coming in from Asia because they wanted to come to the Mecca, to the place. They could get to
Yeah.
Macau a lot easier, but they would fly here. And if they had the money to fly here, we would call them a whale. You're not working for the school and then take your summer vacation to go to Vegas and spend money. No. We were talking about the people that hopped on their private jet and came. And I think it's still somewhat like that. And the other phenomenon that's happening is how great sports is done here. I was able to meet a guy who was a Minnesota hockey fan when they were building the Golden Knights Stadium. We were going to have an expansion team. And those are all legal monopolies in the major sports. NFL's by far the worst. You can't just go out and open up. You and I can't get an NFL team. You got to be billionaire.
But we can still launch a cryptocurrency with the same name as the NFL team.
We could, but we can't. You can't get the state of finance, and then even if you have the money, you can't get them to let you into the NFL unless all the other owners allow it, and that's all legal. Baseball has the same thing, and applying that back to finance in general, what we're going to do, I think what you're doing is more or less looking at the people and the market they're addressing and where they can go and making a decision and then rolling the dice with them. If tomorrow there's some bad news, you got to think about it before you get out. I would imagine your process to drop a company is somewhat similar to your process to acquire an investment.
Yeah, we do it. We do a lot of research. AI is now, obviously, it's a fast way of doing that. So the AI is not going to take over, but people who know how to use AI. You said before about projects being mentioned on Twitter, and you go, oh, it's great, everybody's talking about the new XYZ project, but you run it through the AI and say, hey, how much of this traffic is real? And the AI can look into it and go, oh, these are all paid followers, or these are all robots, or whatever. So all of the chatter is actually made up. So when we do the research into who's running the project, who's behind it, what's the network, who's talking about it, what experience do the founders have? So we bought into a little thing called Solana. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Solana came out, it was like 18 cents. We did a lot of research into it. It said, oh, we're going to be the Ethereum killer. A lot of people came out and said they were going to be the Ethereum killer back then. So we bought into this thing, and 12 months later, it was 35 cents. And if you were buying stocks and you double your stocks in 12 months, you'd be dancing in the streets. But this is crypto, right? So we looked at it and went, why are we holding this thing? And we did the research again and looked into it, went, yeah, this has got some legs. This is going to be good. And then it went from 35 cents up to $150. I mean, cool, okay. And then we started to say, what's the real value of this? And sell it down and take our profit. So another example was Coinbase. Like when Coinbase came out, it was about $300 a stock. Right. We did our research and went, it's probably worth about $100 based on forward earnings and things like that. So we didn't buy it when it first came out. Our Coinbase got sued by the SEC and everybody was very down on Coinbase and the price dropped down to $50. So that's when we bought Coinbase because we thought it's an absolute bargain and it was unlikely to go broke. It'd probably be swallowed up by a competitor more than anything else. At that price, it was a great value. Right. And then after the SEC dropped their case, the price went back up to $200. So the people who bought on launch are still sad. We've quadrupled our money by buying well and then saying, okay, what's a good price for this and what's a good price to sell?
So you're doing a mixture because it's not purely watching the charts and grabbing something as it's moving up or moving down, betting accordingly. And once you start doing the research, and again, like Daryl Zero says, you've got to be looking for everything because then you're certain to find something. There are things we don't know about, we haven't thought about that we will find, we will come across. And I like when it's portrayed in somewhat in the Daryl Zero character, but also one of the big investors in the Silicon Valley, the HBO series, would just say, don't they use sesame seeds on buns? Find out how many they use. And he's read some small article about weather in the subcontinent. And he makes, I don't know, that's where sesame seeds come from. He made an investment and he made him $1 billion because he had the insight to think of, we're going to need sesame seeds and they're going to go up for a while. And that seems wonderful. But I guess it's getting to my main problem with finance is that we have used some of the greatest minds in the last 30, 40 years to go into finance right out of Harvard MBA program, the very top students, and giving them $500,000 the first year and signing bonuses on top of that. And they're out trying to figure out how to beat each other and, of course, stay way, way ahead of us. Most of us don't consider the dark transactions, the 75% of New York Stock Exchange that is done by computers in the dark that we never see. And are they still reacting or are they making it? Who knows? But if we took that talent and put that all into creating more things, using AI, robots, and everything else we have to make the world a better place, they might make the same money for a quarter of the time, be entrepreneurs, love them. A lot of them get burned out and hate that life, a lovely life. Be more like you, say. So who knows? It seems very possible that we could get into more abundance than we know what to do with. And so that's what I'm betting on. I see that, one, I've got to look at the real possible scenario that I'm going to be alive 50 to 70 more years, because the technology allows for that. I personally have my concerns that maybe I haven't taken care of this body enough for that. Maybe I'm a little bit too far gone for medical science.
We've got nanobots, so you'll be fine.
We'll find out about that. But when I start looking at what my children will be able to do and my grandchildren, no doubt about it, living way past 100 is very possible. We're solving all the right diseases. So how do we invest when the world has a declining birth rate, but still has a lot of people who aren't even attuned enough to get themselves into a mutual fund, do any kind of savings? They just want to give me some pay and I'm going to go party. And I think that's going to be a possible lifestyle. I think if you're willing to work 10, 20 hours a week, you'll be able to put together enough to do okay and maybe have some form of public subsidy in it. I'm not a believer of just every human being deserves X and we've got to make that X high enough to support everybody. But I have no problem with us saying no one should be falling between the cracks and be hungry in an abundant world. We have enough calories to feed everybody right now. More abundance is meaning we're going to still be able to feed everybody, and we'll be able to work out whatever problems are keeping us from getting the food to the right place in India or Africa or China.
And
it's
all the distribution, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And
we've got enough calories to feed everyone, and we've got enough money on the planet to make everybody a millionaire.
Yeah.
But some people have got 400 billion and some people have got less than 100.
And it's not a fixed pie. We're not taking pieces out of a pie. More abundance means that if you get rich, I can get richer from you getting rich. We got to find another solution. I think number one is not looking at it as a cash solution. I don't think transfer payments are ever going to fix it. But I got together with Claude.ai, my favorite one to talk to for some reason. I think I like the font on it. And it's a bit of the off-white on that one. But for some reason, I've always enjoyed talking to that more. From the very first session I had, I spent a half hour the first time. And it gave me, the question I was asking is the difference between persuasion and propaganda. And there's some very common idea of propaganda as a bad word. And it wasn't 100 years ago. And the guy that came up with using the term for more than just the government putting out what they have to say, it's actually the Catholic Church that invented propaganda in the Holy Wars. But in 100 years ago, Edward Bernays, one of the fathers of modern public relation, started spinning stuff and giving people reasons to buy something different or allow something different. Women smoking was one of the ones he was championing out. He got paid to do that. I just read a book where if you do the survey, you can say that 1 out of 2 people is 50%, and you can redefine the group so that the group's 500 people, and then it's 2 out of 500. And it's the same person, same demographics, It has to do with I think it was talking about breast cancer, how
Yeah.
prevalent that woman could get breast cancer. Don't trust it.
Mm.
Prostate,
Mm.
the number of times they get a positive result. If you get a positive result on a prostate test and you have the cancer, good thing. Life is good.
Mm.
But
Mm.
99.5% of the time, it's negative. The reality is negative. And they take the
Mm.
test, and some 1% of those get a false positive. So
Mm.
there
Mm.
is a 600 time chance that 600 times the chance that you will get a false positive than you would get a real positive. And
Mm.
of course, we don't know. They just all result in a positive. And
Mm.
so I immediately said, if it takes 20 years to develop cancer and I'm in my 60s, I'm going to roll the dice. I don't want to know what it is. Doctor went ahead and ordered the test, and I can't get them. I've been about 4 now since that. Every time I get a blood test, they come back and say, oh, you don't have this. I don't want to know. I don't care about it, because if you said yes, I wouldn't do anything any differently. I'm not going to fight a cancer that might kill me in 20 years if I'm the one out of 25 that are there. This is not medical advice. Those listening, please don't take my prostate advice any more than you would take my financial advice. Check these things
Warren's
out
advice:
yourself.
get your checkups.
Listen to Jeremy. He probably knows better. So,
Well, one of the things they say in investment is always do your own research.
yes.
Because whatever I say, whatever Warren says, whatever someone else says, you want to double check that. Because there's a small possibility that after 40 years of doing this that I might make a mistake. And there's a small possibility that by the time you get the information has changed. A few years
Especially
ago,
today.
I would have been telling you to buy XYZ company or XYZ car manufacturer.
Yeah.
But then, you know, a year or two later, you find out Jaguar is now owned by China and BMW is now owned by China and someone else. The companies have either disappeared or they've been swallowed up or they've been renamed or repossessed or whatever.
I'm watching a series on YouTube, and the guy decided that everyday access to his series, he was going to take a Patreon thing. And I looked at the deal, I'm going like, I just don't care about what he's saying that much. And so it's still a subscription, and my wife likes it. So every morning it's on there, and it's labeled like today we saw the one from same day a week ago, right? It's Monday, and so it was last Monday. And he's talking about things, especially when he was talking about how fast the tariffs were changing. Because the information seems totally inaccurate a week later. And I have learned that while the guy is very smart, I read his book, I like what he says, the way he views the world in geopolitics. When he starts making comments on what's happening to day, he doesn't know. He doesn't know much at all. He's making some assumptions and some things. And especially when I'm able to say, yeah, in the past week, he's already been proven wrong on this and that. And sheesh, I record podcasts and they come out 2-3 weeks after I record them. How many times am I out of date?
I would hope that when a politician says we're going to have tariffs or we're going to have no tariffs, that decision would stay for more than 24 hours.
You would hope.
Because this is what enables us to actually make the longer term predictions. In 2006, I could accurately predict there was going to be a stock market crash and a property crash, maybe in 6 months, maybe 12 months, maybe 2 years, but it's definitely going to happen. Even in 2019, like we came out in 2019, a free newsletter, September 2019, we recognized commodity prices, particularly copper, was going down. We saw the repo market interest rates going up. And I mean, that's two of the things that happened, two of the three things that happened before the global financial crisis. So I wasn't waiting for the third shoe to drop. So we advised our investors 6 months before the pandemic. We didn't know there was going to be a disease. We didn't know there was going to be any of that. We just said, get the hell out of stocks. Buy gold, buy silver, buy Bitcoin, because there's going to be a crash. We just don't know when. And when the crash comes, the Fed reacts by printing cash, and cash just devalues everything except for gold, silver, and Bitcoin. So again, we didn't know there was going to be a disease. We didn't know there was going to be lockdown or any of that sort of stuff.
Even if you go into cash under the mattress, there are times when that's the best thing to do. I wouldn't say any time lately that has been the best thing to do, but cash equivalents in some places make some sense. It's weird when I look at global and see how United States is winning post-pandemic. And just because I'm identifying the years, not having to do with the pandemic per se, but you look at it seems like we've tied our hands behind our back, put a bag over our head, and have somebody pushing us in the wrong direction. How is
Yeah.
it that we're doing so well? How bad must it be to be in some of these countries where we've grown by 40% and Europe stayed even? Yeah, we're not winning. Something just is weird in the, and when I started studying how exchange really works, of course, it's not a battle to make sure that we send the same amount of money to Australia as Australia sends it to us. There's so many other things going on in that relationship. We need what we get from you. You definitely need things from the US. Those things may not add up to equal. We buy a whole lot of stuff from China. I think we'll
Yeah.
continue to buy a whole lot of stuff from China because we're not going to build factories and put good men in the Midwest to work.
Not
No,
for
we're going
$4
to,
an
if we
hour,
build
no.
factories, we're going to build factories without any people in them. You usually like to have one man and one dog.
Yes.
The man's
I
there to
know that
feed the
one.
dog. The dog's there to bite the man if he tries
Bite
to
the
touch
man.
anything.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. That'll be the thing. And all due respect to the current administration, which is not a lot of respect, but if they brought in a sliding scale of tariffs over time and said, we're going to ramp it up to 90% or 30%
Right.
over the next 3 years, people would have started, like Nike might have started closing down factories in China, bringing them
Yeah.
back to the US, because it takes time to move a factory and get some robots in there to replace the workers. Because obviously, Chinese people will work for less than American citizens, but robots will work for even less than that. So that's why we
Well,
need a
and
bit
if the
of time
Chinese
to
are
adapt
putting in
these
robots, you already know that you're not going to move
Exactly.
those jobs. And I
things.
think the big fallacy there is that people think we can move jobs. Jobs are not what we move. We move factories and production, and the
Yeah.
jobs happen to be at certain places. And then there's another fact that right now it's something like 500,000 workers are needed in manufacturing in the US. The jobs are not being filled. And we're kicking out some of the people that would take those jobs. We're deporting, and we're
I
setting up
know.
these tariffs and stuff. However,
There needs
all
to be a
that
little
being
bit more
said,
long range planning.
we have an administration right now that likes crypto. And
Finally.
suddenly, instead of when,
Finally. Yeah.
have you seen those things when you go to invest in a project? I see a lot of them because I advise new projects, and they're projects where they've given me tokens, but it's illegal for me to buy tokens because there's a list of countries, and all of the horrible countries of the world are listed.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they do this, because at the end is United States alphabetically. Yeah, we're at the end. But then after United States is Canada, because Canada does what the U.S. does. Kind of stuck.
You can't buy this if you're from Iran, North Korea, or the United States.
Yeah,
Like,
in United States. I talked to the guy who's trading in, what were we talking about? And he trades out of the Dominican Republic.
well,
And VPNs there from his house in Las Vegas. That seems like ridiculous. Setting up corporations in other jurisdictions and trying to do things like, some of it is some good tax planning, but
and not financial advice, but it is possible to get photo ID from another country. It's possible to get a VPN to pretend that you're in another country and get into these investments. It's possible, but we're not saying that's how to do that.
no. When they had the Panama Papers and found how a lot of the people leading the world had Panama corporations and all sorts of whatever going on, tax planning, we'll say, whether it's legal or not, the big symptom there to look at is that things are so screwed up that anybody with a little bit of money that knows what they're doing has to figure out a way to avoid getting the tax all in one place.
The papers were released, but we got all their names, but was anybody prosecuted? Did anyone go to jail? Not that I've heard of. It's not these things are illegal. It's just that most people don't know how to do it.
Having the same question, and yes, there was some things that happened, but for the most part, no. For the most part, the oligarchs in Russia that have had their money frozen around the world because of this Ukraine thing, they're still operating.
Of course. That Russia's buying oil from the oil-producing nations and using crypto because they're sanctioned out of using the SWIFT system, the banking system.
Of course.
But they can still pay in Bitcoin. They can pay in gold.
I learned from the housing crisis here where I lost my house was that no homeowner got relief, but billions and billions, nearly $1 trillion was pumped into the system to keep the banks alive.
Yeah.
And so I came up with the idea, what if we wiped that part of the monopoly board clean and just started over? What if we had a jubilee and just everybody lost everything
Yeah.
And if you happen to be standing on a piece of property, it was yours. Otherwise, if you were in an apartment complex, everybody owned their own unit, and there'd be
Yeah.
a messes to go on. We have to figure out things, but you can't make everybody equal. So the
No.
only thing you could do is take everything away from everybody. Of course, I
Yeah.
came up with these ideas when I was broke. I feel a little
Of
different now.
course. Yeah, yeah. Socialism is not really good for the people who have actually got stuff.
No, and it's not socialism, it's just a reset. It's like
Kidding.
stay. I still
Yeah.
own my boat or car or house or whatever, but we get rid
Yeah.
of that. I wouldn't do, I'm a renter. So maybe
Yeah.
I would still have the same landlord.
Alternatives and options. We were talking before about being in Thailand and using Gojek, and there's Uber, as
Yeah.
opposed to the taxis. New York taxis had it good for many years.
Yeah.
And then rideshare comes in and disrupts the industry. Hotels had it for very good for many years, and then Airbnb comes in and disrupts the industry. And the banks have had it good for about 500 years. And now crypto's come in and said, hey, we can actually transfer funds over our network, and it works at 2 a.m. and it works on a Sunday and it works on a public holiday. Once they can't be taken back. So this is just a disruption to the banking industry. Some banks are adapting and some are just going, no way.
Yeah. I brought up Paisley. The reason is that anybody will be able to have their own token. But what it can be is I can say, I'm going to provide freelance services of 1,000 hours, and I'm going to pre-sell those. And I'm going to put them in at a good price. I'm going to raise the money I need to buy a house or open my business or whatever I want to do. And then I'll provide the service, very much like your bread. And Paisley is up and running right now. And this would work in theory. Of course, so there's a whole marketing challenge to the thing. And there are some regulations. But more or less, it's going to be able to operate like a credit union, which is different banking laws here in the U.S., or co-op, which is an interesting thing. The, what do you call it when you start a company? A DAO. You start a blockchain a company on blockchain. Yeah. The co-op laws are 300 years of law that pretty well take care of everything that legally that you need to do to operate like that. Credit unions being one part of that. And so we're exploring those things. But for the most part, I can now, if I create warrant tokens, I can say they're worth whatever I say they're worth. And then you can choose to buy them. Me saying they are worth $100 of my time wouldn't be accurate. It should say
the market will decide. You can list them for $100, and people might start selling them for $60.
But I can say they are worth X minutes of my time, and then the market can decide what my time's worth. And if more people want to use them, then there are tokens available. The value will go up. My remaining tokens will go up. My future hours I am able to sell, but those tokens I sold will be a bargain for the person that bought them. And now that becomes something that every individual can do. It's literally one line of code to set one of these up. And every freelancer can. And those that don't want to and just want to operate in tokens equivalent to cash, they can too. I'm fascinated by how big the
stablecoins,
stablecoins, thank you, that it is so huge. What is it? Trillions of dollars in trading happening with stablecoins. And just like when I first learned about SWIFT and interbank transfers and how much that was. And I think too much, maybe, with my idea that we ought to wipe out a lot of it and go back to barter. But if you and I want to do business, we don't need to access all of that, or maybe we could.
And if I want to send you $1,000 on the SWIFT system, I've got to pay a little bit of money to the bank. And I don't get a share in that. You don't get a share in that. But if I'm sending $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to you, number one, it costs 50 cents to send $10,000 rather than $70 or $80
it costs 50 cents to send $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's what crypto does, is democratize and making the banking system accessible to everyone. Because if you don't have photo ID, if you live in some poor sub-Saharan country that doesn't have photo ID, or you don't have a passport, you can still actually get crypto, even though you can't open a bank account. You can still transfer money to friends and family in any other country in the world.
I have two projects. One is Transfer Mobile Money, Koi Networks, and the other one is a guy who operates, he calls it a media company out of Africa, but he's finding influencers. In the West, if you're an influencer, you sign up for Instagram or TikTok payments, and you can make a lot of money doing that, whatever it is you do to make those videos. And generally, people like you and me may be worth more in the open market, but we're not on TikTok.
Yeah, yeah.
Weird way the world works there, but all fine. But if you're in Africa, collecting the money from PayPal is impossible. By the
Exactly.
time you get a PayPal account and get it set up, the cut that gets taken out of that before it gets to you is too
Yeah.
much. So he set up a
Yep.
payment system using blockchain, and it will be able to be instant. I think he's pre-blockchain. He's setting up the network and the mechanics of how it works, and we're introducing him to coin networks as a
Yep.
possibility of a way to monetize it in there. And of course, Coin Network will not work unless it's able to use stablecoin. It's in
Yep.
Kenya and it will use the Kenya shilling. And so, sure, if you care about doing trade outside the country and there's always 40% inflation or devaluing of the currency, so let's just say 40%, it's enough
Yep.
that you feel it. But I asked him, I says, how could anybody live like this? And he goes, Warren, you're forgetting the main thing. The average Kenyan doesn't trade with anybody outside of Kenya. They're
Yeah.
doing fine. They're prospering. Their money's okay. They have to deal with inflation. They don't have everything they need there. The development's behind. But as far as keeping up with by being able to do mobile payments with their phone, it's revolutionized thing to where people can store a little bit of savings and then they save it in their M-Pesa account. There's better ways to do it today, but that M-Pesa account has gone, they went from 15 to over 100% of the adults have banking accounts. Over
Yeah.
100
Yeah.
means there's business accounts and whatnot. But, and then of course it becomes very less expensive to transfer something into that. Once you put that on a blockchain, you use stable coins and bang, whatever the Kenyan
Fractions of
shilling
a cent.
is worth that much against a dollar. And you can send the money, you can do whatever. The transfer is like nothing. In the 0.5% range versus 28% for Western Union from some countries. And completely changed.
Funds flow is going to be a big thing, even you made in Forex, because let's say if the US goes into a recession because of all of these tariffs and things, the US dollar gets devalued, then the Fed will react by reducing the interest rates. And then a lot of funds are going to go out of the US searching for who's got the higher interest rates. Is the Bank of Japan paying 4% or is the Bank of London paying? So people selling the US to buy foreign currencies, that's going to further reduce the US dollar and increase whatever the magic currency is over there. But the funds transfer charges that the banks are picking up, and again, we're not sharing in that. Stable coins and crypto and blockchain is a way to bypass that. So if you wanted to buy a barrel of oil from that guy in Kenya right now, you'd have to transfer US dollars to the Kenyan shilling. I would have to transfer from Australian dollars to US dollars to Kenyan shillings, and he's got to transfer it back so he can actually use that money. And then whether the physical goods come or not doesn't matter. We could probably use software rather than oil. But the 3 or 4 transfers cost so much money that it doesn't make it worthwhile. Whereas if I can transfer any crypto to him straight away, cuts out the middleman.
I heard about a Norwegian-funded refugee camp. I believe it's in Uganda. 1 million people live there. And the funding to run it is sent, and 40% of the funds are actually used on the project. By the time it gets transferred from Norway to wherever, so you've got to send 10 million to get 4 million.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, what a mess. It's been such a delight. We'll have to do this again sometime. And what we've forgotten is how do people get connected with Jeremy and start making some money?
Yeah, just find me bostontrading.co. So Boston, like the dog, like the city. That's my Boston Terriers that were barking earlier. At bostontrading.co. If you visit the site, you can actually have a look at our portfolio. We've got live updates on our portfolio, so you can see exactly what we're holding. If you're one of those people who likes to buy crypto yourself,
I can watch you lose my money.
Absolutely. You can watch what we're doing, so you can see. If you want to copy our trades, you can do that because we're trying to help you. Right? If you've got time, you can copy our trades, you can read all the material, you can get all the training for free. If you don't have time, then of course we'll do it for you and charge you a small fee. But to jump on there, you can pick up my stock market book for free, the one that Warren was promoting 20 odd years ago. And it's still good advice. It's timeless advice because it's teaching you how to think ahead, how to react. If the interest rates are going down, that's going to affect property prices positively. If this is going and this is going, there's going to be a stock market crash coming up. So it's timeless advice for mastering the stock market and mastering the crypto market by looking at what's going to happen in 6 months' time, 12 months' time. Ignore the daily chop and change and focus on where you're going to be. Gretzky said, skate to where the puck's going to be, right?
And get the chance, figure out a way to support good people and take care of yourself and somebody else. Is a popular podcast thing. I'm trying to figure out how to steal it and reword it as mine. But I love the idea of help out. You got to help yourself. Capitalism is good. But then the reason we do this is to be able to help to do bigger things. There's certainly things well beyond the market that we can do.
If you
want to
be a billionaire, then like most people make enough money to feed themselves. And then when you have a family, you make enough money to feed your family. Right. But if you suddenly had 27 children instead of 3 children, you'd find a way to feed those.
Right.
So if you want to be a millionaire, if you want to be a billionaire, whatever the next step is for you, adopt more children, right? Pick up a village in Africa and say, I'm going to commit to $15 a month to help these kids in Africa, or commit to $10 a week to help someone somewhere else. The more you can take on giving and supporting others, in your brain, in the back of your head, it'll be like, oh my God, my family is now 300,000 people. Like, Oprah gives away so much money and she's still the richest female billionaire.
Right here, Tony Robbins of late, and he's still Tony Robbins, and get out the salt shaker because you might need a few grains to be able to take some of the things he says. But when he talks about his motivation, if it's so real, he wants to feed people. And he started when he was nearly homeless, finding a family and helping them get a Thanksgiving dinner. And now he counts in the millions or billions of meals that get served. And again, it's got some BS in it someplace in just the way he hypes everything. But you feel like he's honestly trying to go for that. And you can see how that could motivate somebody at that level. At the top of his game, he doesn't need more money.
But the more you got, the more you can give it away. And you can start to do things and say, I want a school in Africa like Oprah had, and I want to do this. And start small. Just start with one person, helping one other person.
I want to empower people that are building schools in Africa. Hopefully Africans. I went from that to
entrepreneurial education.
I'd be sending ebooks to Africa, and then I found out that they need something to read it on. And then even beyond that, which they mostly have the mobile phones and whatnot, they need a system that works with that. And so I went through a period of time thinking I would just plow through Africa, east to west coast, with a major highway so they could get goods moved. We have the Congo problem when you do that. But some way you could figure out how to have roads or trains or flights. I actually hear that even today, if you're in Nigeria and need to get to Nairobi, you're going, which is west to east, you need to fly to Europe. You don't have to. Our Kenya project leader lives in London. He goes back to Kenya on a regular basis, as he's Kenyan. And he says if he's in Nairobi, he wouldn't try to fly directly to Kenya. He'd go home to London. In his case, he gets business and family back in London. But he says the time is not much more than if he'd tried to take the indirect flights and land who knows where. So much good left to do in the world. I think it's silly to think that we can say, let's see about controlling growth. We need to be going full speed ahead because all those Africans want everything we have, and Indians and Chinese that don't have it, and more power to them. I want them to have it. And it's a whole different social program. You and I would probably agree and have a great time talking about that kind of stuff, but everything from the myths of media to whatever. But hey, the big one is if somebody wants to have some stable money and income, getting into a fund like this is a good thing to do. Getting into the companies I mentioned makes sense. And again, on paper, these are not investment recommendations. These are ideas to get you thinking about what you should be doing. Even if it is helping your friend open a sandwich shop, there's something you can do. That somebody helped a guy open a sandwich shop, and it was called Subway, and he got out very well for his $10,000. But had he stayed in it, boy, would he be rich today. And all he did was lend $10,000 to a sandwich shop. We're still talking millions of dollars. For one investment.
Prepay your sandwiches. So again, not for financial advice. Get into crypto whichever way you can, whether you do it yourself or whether you do it through a fund like ours, and support somebody else.
If you just don't know crypto, go to Coinbase or one of the others like that. Open up an easy wallet, get $100 put in there, and then watch it. And Don't worry that it drops to half the price sometime. Even if it dropped to zero, you'll see
Learn
better
from our
experience.
newsletters. Diversify. Always
Yeah.
diversify.
Always diversify. It's been
we'll
a
do a
wonderful
part two, mate.
conversation. Look forward
Thank
to
you.
working with you again. Bye.